I'm here to describe how this country's security and prosperity is uniquely and disproportionately protected and sustained by globally deployed American sea power. I'm here because our nation's security and prosperity is increasingly threatened by the military forces of rising powers who don't see the world the same way we do. I'm here because this problem grows worse with each passing year, as we seem to pay less and less attention to sea power. Finally, I'm here because these are things that most Americans are simply not aware of. So what I'd like to do is to pose and then answer 5 very simple questions about American sea power, and then ensure that there's some time at the end to engage in some questions and answers. So let's start with question number 1. Does America need a powerful, globally deployed U.S. Navy? Well, the question ultimately depends on what kind of country you wish to live in and what sort of country you wish to pass to your grandchildren. That is, if you wish for the United States to maintain its position as the world's premier diplomatic, military, economic, and political power, well then yes, it needs a powerful, globally deployed Navy. We sustain a powerful, globally deployed Navy for one very important reason, and that is to guarantee freedom of the seas. Freedom of the seas is the minimum condition necessary for global trade, the overwhelming majority of which moves by sea. Our nation's ability to import from and export to global markets is utterly dependent upon freedom of the seas, as is the prosperity of virtually all other trading nations. I cross the Chesapeake Bay Bridge several times a week, heading to the Pentagon or Capitol Hill or other places in Washington, from my home here in Easton. As I look over my shoulder at the staggering number of ships headed in and out of that port, I see ships that are headed outbound with the products of American mines, farms, and manufacturing plants. And I see ships headed inbound with the raw materials to fire our manufacturing and consumer goods for our stores. When you roll that up nationwide across the 57 coastal seaports in the United States of America, the degree to which our dependence on freedom of the seas for our prosperity becomes obvious and enormous. In 2014, which is the last year I have figures for, over 23 million jobs nationwide were supported by cargo moving through our nation's coastal seaports. Over $321 billion in local, state, and federal tax revenue was generated by that cargo movement. And over $4.6 trillion in economic activity, fully 1/4 of this nation's total gross domestic product, passed through our nation's ports. For over 500 years, the global system of commerce has worked best when there was a dominant naval power ensuring that the seas were free and open to commerce among nations. And since World War II, that dominant naval power has been the United States Navy. This role has never been taken out of a sense of charity or magnanimity. Quite the opposite. The dominant naval power exercises this responsibility because it is in its own interests to do so. Others benefit, but no one benefits as much as the people of the United States do. Question number 2. What does the nation need the Navy to do? The modern Navy has many missions and tasks, but as I said earlier, it has one overarching purpose, and that is to guarantee freedom of the seas. It does this by maintaining ships and submarines and aircraft carriers far from our shores in order to protect our interests, assure our allies, and deter potential adversaries. The task of imposing its will at sea in order to influence events ashore demands that the Navy possess the ships, submarines, aircraft, systems, logistics, and forward basing that enable it to do so. Unlike any other nation on Earth, our Navy is not comprised simply to defeat other navies. It is built and sustained to influence entire nations. To do so, it must be able to control the seas and skies where it wishes to operate. It must be able to deliver precise combat power ashore, and it must be able to methodically deny the use of the seas to adversaries. Some wonder whether our Navy needs to be able to perform massive humanitarian operations, such as we saw in the Caribbean hurricane this fall. My answer is no. We don't need a Navy to be able to do those things. But doing those things is a strong demonstration of our commitment to our friends and allies, a clear sign of the compassion of the American people, and a strong signal to those who might challenge peace that the power providing those humanitarian needs was planned and procured for more violent ends, and that such a Navy can pursue those ends as quickly and efficiently as it pursues humanitarian ones if the need arises. Question number 3, why does our Navy have to be so big? Most of the world's activity does not happen here in our Western Hemisphere, but in Europe and Asia. It has been this nation's unwritten national security strategy for decades to prevent the rise in either Asia or Europe of any one power that could so dominate that region to the extent that we dominate ours. This is because if such a power did arise, they could not only lock us out of their region's resources and economic activity, but that they could also then look to threaten our position in the Western Hemisphere. And since the world's surface is covered by more than 70% by water, most of which is not claimed or even claimable by any power, our uniquely large and powerful Navy gives us the ability to exploit these international seas to protect our interests. A powerful Navy is an asymmetric advantage that helps us ensure that if conflict does come, it happens over there and not over here. Question 4. What exactly are you so worried about, Brian, that you would come talk to the Easton Rotary at a lunchtime meeting in January? I'm worried that we are growing as a nation increasingly unprepared for the rigors of great power competition. China is growing powerful. It is making unsupportable territorial claims in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, and it is increasingly acting to intimidate its neighbors, several of whom are treaty allies of the United States of America. Russia is reprising its historic role as a paranoid Eurasian power that seeks to create a security buffer in its near abroad, something it has done time and again since the days of Peter the Great. Question 5. What can we do to help ensure that the United States Navy and Marine Corps are properly resourced for the critical role they play in our security and prosperity? Pick up the phone when you are moved. Send an email. Write a letter. Contact your senators and your representative and hold them to account. Make your voices heard. Attend a town hall and ask them to explain what they are doing to prepare this nation for great power competition again. I believe that we will one day be ready for that competition, for the challenges posed by Russia and China. My hope, my prayer really, is that preparedness comes as a result of an energized, informed, and active citizenry, and not as the result of a disaster that is caused by waiting too long to prepare. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions. The question is about sequestration, part of the Budget Control Act of 2011. Basically, it was a deal made between both parties in Congress to say that the cuts will be, if the executive budget does not meet certain targets, that cuts will be implemented equally on defense programs and non-defense discretionary spending. Sequestration has been terrible for all of the military services. What has suffered most has been the current readiness of those forces. That comes from their ability to train and their ability to do maintenance, to be ready. There is a hole in the training and maintenance accounts of all of the armed services, and that hole has to be filled if the military is going to be ready, even if a new administration comes in and decides it wants to have a larger military. We have to start by filling the holes, and the sequestration created a good deal of the hole that we're in right now. The question is about the danger of North Korea and ICBMs, I think specifically from the context of my speech where I mentioned China and Russia. North Korea the Department of Defense talks about Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and Islamic terrorism, or I'm not sure what phrase they're using for that these days, but North Korea is a threat, clearly is a threat. And I wish people would stop referring to the North Korean leadership as crazy or insane or whatever. They're very sane. If you think about their strategic goal, and the strategic goal is to stay in power, they are doing just fine at achieving that goal. And we are indeed, I wouldn't say immediately threatened by North Korean nuclear aspirations, but we will be in the near term. They're testing missiles that carry, they've obviously exploded nuclear weapons. The part they're trying to get right now are the delivery vehicles. They've had some challenges with that. We, on the other hand, are working very hard at ballistic missile defense systems, both land-based and sea-based and space-based. Those systems are maturing rapidly. I've been involved in some of the work in ballistic missile defense over the last 10 years. I'm comfortable with where we are, but the North Korean threat is something that pushes us and makes us work harder on that. The question gets to the question of burden sharing. I don't think anyone who studies these things would tell you that the Allies spending more money on defense would make us unhappy. Of course we'd like to see that. We have little control over what they spend. Their populations, their domestic political situation drives a good deal of what they believe they can spend. Their commitments to whatever social welfare state exists in that country is part of the reason that they have whatever is left over to pay for defense that they have. I believe that this growing great power contention is going to cause nations to begin naturally to spend more on their own defense. I don't believe it is necessarily a result of years and years of American leaders telling them you need to spend more on your own defense. Rumsfeld told them, Gates told them, Bush told them privately, Obama told them privately. I don't think it's the result of that sort of public statement. I think it really is, their growth is going to come as a result of their calculated perceptions of risk. And those perceptions of risk apply to us equally. If I look at Russia and China, I think about our extended team. We've got more friends, and I like our friends better. I want our friends to become more capable, to be able to interoperate with our sophisticated military better, to be able to produce some of the mass that we would need for a high-end conflict or to deter a high-end conflict. So I would like to encourage our friends to build more. I don't see that as a threat to our build-up or a substitute for our build-up. Because at the end of the day, I don't want this nation's security in someone else's hands. I want us to be able to take care of business when we have to. So the question gets to the two small Navy vessels that were captured off Iranian-claimed territory, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago maybe. It's a tough situation, really, really tough situation. I don't believe those two boats and their lieutenant, 25-year-old commander, were well served by the command in the region. I don't believe that they had sufficient protection from other elements of that region. I think there were mistakes made there, serious mistakes made there. But you're the 25-year-old lieutenant in charge of those boats. And don't get me wrong, I don't like what I saw in terms of the conduct of that lieutenant or some of the people that were interviewed by the Iranian press. My training is name, rank, serial number. That's what you do, right? But this lieutenant on the spot said, I am not going to be responsible for starting a war in the Middle East. That's a tough spot to be in. So when his boats were surrounded by heavily armed Iranian vessels whose aggregate power greatly outstripped his own, and he did not know that there was any help available, and he knew that we were not at that time at war with the Islamic Republic of Iran, he decided he wasn't going to start that war. I need to think more about that decision, but standing here now, I cannot tell you that I would not have done the same thing. As to the broader question, I think that was the Iranians have been doing stuff like this for years. I have been harassed by the Iranians in the Persian Gulf. What they're trying to do is condition our behavior. They're trying to, I think, lull us into a sense. First of all, they want to know what our patterns are going to be. How will we react? At what range will we get nervous? Will we start to talk to them? What will we do in response? They're trying to catalog our responses and condition our responses. At some point, it might become valuable to do something unexpected. They have gotten very comfortable with getting incredibly harassing of our naval vessels. That was in my view, that was the thing that sort of woke our Fifth Fleet power structure up. And I have heard of very positive things with respect to how they believe they would meet threats of that nature in the future. But ones obviously we can't talk about here. Two things have happened to technology in the last few decades. You go back to the early 1960s, the United States pretty much had cornered the market on technology worldwide. We had giant labs, both government-run and commercially run. And not only did the United States dominate technology, but within the United States, the military dominated technology within the country. Neither of those conditions exist today. Technology has globalized. It's everywhere. Within the United States, we have a significant technology, we have a superb technology base. What we have is a frustrating antediluvian acquisition system in the federal government that those commercial developers don't want to play in. And until the federal government gets its act together and figures out how to acquire things quickly with a minimum of paperwork and a maximum of return on investment, they're not going to want to play. The biggest problem right now isn't our technology base. It's this wall between the technologists and goodness, and that wall is the acquisition system.
Brian, your words and knowledge are phenomenal, and we greatly appreciate sharing them with us and allowing us to query you with some very important issues that are before our country.